Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Day,
And I am Jillian Mason.
and this is Medicare for All, the podcast for everybody who needs healthcare. Well, Jillian,
Mm, I know what you're going to say, Ben.
the voters have spoken,
Ugh.
and despite all of our recommendations and urgings to the contrary, they have seemed to vote for Trump yet again. So we are all obviously pretty sad, scared, pissed off, trying to cope by disassociating and stress eating as well. I don't know if is it okay to say on here recreational drug use perhaps on the uptick maybe. But regardless, once again, it is Trump's America, and we are just living or more often dying in it. So we know from experience, we've been through this once before, that a Trump presidency is very, very bad for our health. But now he has a surprising new ally in making our lives shorter and more dangerous. That is, of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So RFK is a former presidential candidate and critic of Trump, formerly critic of Trump. You may not know all these other things about him, but he is an expert falconer. He's an eater of roadkill, a source of shame for the entire Kennedy family.
Yeah.
That's an accomplishment. And a superspreader of false information about vaccines. And now he's about to bring his mission to make America healthy again to the masses as the Secretary of Health and Human Services for the entire fucking US of A. So in this episode, against our best wishes, we're going to try to figure out what the hell that all means.
I mean, okay, honestly, Ben, I don't even know what make America healthy again means. Like,
oh, you know what it means. You know what it means. Clearly, it means let's go back to the days when everyone knew that smoking was healthy for you. It means let's go back to the good old days when all of our drinking water had really lovely undertones of lead contamination, you know. And this is, I think you might appreciate the days before antidepressants existed. Lovely. Yeah, let's just go back to those days. We all know when America was healthy again.
I mean, not to mention like polio. Like a lot of people are really nostalgic for polio.
Well, some people do seem to be nostalgic for pre-vaccine days, which actually were quite bad.
Segue.
Spoiler alert.
Oh boy. So yeah, so we've got RFK Jr. and he has some wild ideas. And I know they've been like in the news and everything, but you know, I wanted to just kind of test you, Ben, to see if you've been paying attention to the RFK Jr. of it all.
Okay. And I have not cheated. I've not looked at your questions yet. So I'm coming to this with fresh eyes, fresh brain.
Wonderful. Excellent.
Hit me with it.
This is wait, don't tell me about RFK.
Okay.
So it's a quiz that I've come up with, and
you're definitely not going to win the prize on this one. I'm not going to do well.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some negative health outcomes, and you guess what RFK Jr. has said is the cause of the problem.
Okay.
Right?
I'm ready.
All right. So the first one is super easy, right?
Okay.
All right. So problem. Autism, cancer, autoimmune disorders, and ADHD. What did RFK Jr. say was the cause?
Well, the first one tipped it off, which is it must be vaccines. I hadn't realized he attributed so many things to vaccines, though.
So many.
ADHD, really? That's a good one.
I mean, you know, the vaccine stuff is old, right? Like it's old school. Obviously, it has been just debunked, right? But it's his whole activism around this is primarily based on the fact that some of the earlier vaccines included a preservative that's called thimerosal, and it's a compound that contains mercury. And, you know, even though the notion that thimerosal in vaccines was actually causing health problems was completely debunked, they sort of the FDA went the extra step of actually phasing out thimerosal in children's vaccines. So there hasn't been any mercury in children's vaccines since 2001. And yet people still continue to be neurodivergent, have cancer, or autoimmune disorders, and ADHD.
Right.
So,
and mercury is just an element. I mean, there are many things made from elements that are dangerous if you consume them whole. But anyway.
That is another intelligent point, and therefore it has no place in this conversation.
All right. I take it back.
All right. So, and then of course, like, I also just want to say, like, because we're going to be talking a lot about the vaccine stuff, and in particular, we know the line is that vaccines cause autism, and one of the problems with that, I just want to say, is seeing autism itself as a problem, right?
Yeah.
It's a problem for our culture, how we actually make sure that people with autism are included, right? But a lot of people with autism don't actually see it as a problem, that they think differently and that their brains are different from other folks, you know?
Yeah, great point. Yeah.
Just had to shout that out. Hey there to all my Audis out there. Okay, so we'll move on to another problem. All right, so here is the problem: arthritis, bone fractures, bone cancer, IQ loss, neurodevelopmental disorders, and thyroid disease. Ben Day, what does RFK Jr. say is the cause?
I was gonna, when you got about halfway through the list, I was like, oh, it's got to be playing football, right? I feel like maybe 75% of that list you could explain by being a professional football player. But there were a couple in there that gave me pause. All right, I think I'm gonna have to give up on.
Well, I mean, I like the answer of football, and I think that someone should suggest that to him, because that feels like a real issue he could deal with. But the cause is actually fluoride in drinking water.
Oh, I should have known.
Fluoride. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting one, because there was actually a huge so it goes city by city. Fluoride in water is a decision that's made by each municipality, cities and towns. And there are actually quite a few cities and towns that do not add fluoride to their water. Fun fact, I lived in England for a year. England does not put fluoride in their water, which is why the British famously have terrible teeth. Yeah. It's like a national identity, bad teeth. But it was a big fight. It was a big fight in the US to get fluoride in municipal water sources. It was led by pediatricians, by children's doctors. And it was definitely like a conspiracy theory versus medicine fight. But I would also throw in there that since I'm married to a German, there are a bunch of European countries that also have this conspiracy theory. And even though they're generally better on everything health related, a lot of European countries also do not add fluoride to their water. So this is like a really big, widespread misinformation item. But.
So he has a good company in this conspiracy theory?
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, he has a lot of company. Yep.
All right. Okay. Here's something that, again, one of these is something that I don't. Okay. So another sort of set of health issues, right? So, okay, this one is fatness, which I, of course, don't really see as a problem, but regardless, he does, right? Fatness, depression, and cancer. What does RFK Jr. says is the cause? Fatness,
depression, and cancer. Is it McDonald's?
Correct.
Yes, nailed it.
Very good, Ben. It is ultra-processed foods.
Okay, all right.
Yes. Specifically, like the McDonald's that Trump shamed him by making him eat on the jet.
Right. Yeah. Doesn't Trump only eat McDonald's? Like.
Yeah. And RFK Jr. has said several times that the food he eats is poison. I just wanted to throw out there as well that one of the possible solutions that he's given for this sort of thing is that we need to change our diets and start having more raw milk.
Oh God, no, that's another really bad one. We covered this in a previous podcast, didn't we?
We did.
Raw milk?
We did.
Oh
yeah. No, we totally did, because we were talking about the fact that bird flu has been on an uptick globally, and bird flu is
mostly in cattle. Yeah.
carried through raw milk.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one. All right. Next. Okay. This is unquestionably a health problem. All right. AIDS. What does RFK Jr. say is the cause?
I'm going to go out a limb here and say not HIV. Is he one of these people who?
Yeah, that is exactly the right answer.
Okay.
He is among the group of public health folks.
That's being
so much
generous.
sarcasm dripping
Yeah.
from all of those words, who are basically like HIV deniers, and they deny that AIDS is actually necessarily caused by HIV. They say that no one's actually isolated HIV, and he elaborates in this in his really crazy banana pants book about Anthony Fauci.
He has a book about Anthony Fauci.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm gonna read it. This is my mini bedtime novel.
I actually think I was looking for it on audiobook. I think it could be, I think it could be like a fun way to fall asleep at night.
Oh my God. Does he say what is the cause of AIDS, or this is not as important? Not as important as being okay.
Just important that Anthony Fauci is wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
Anthony Fauci and all, the consensus of science.
The deep state. Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. On to our next problem. All right. The problem is that we have increasing concentrations of bioavailable aluminum in the environment. Where's that coming from, Ben, according to RFK Jr.?
Bioavailable aluminum. I'm not even sure I know what that means. Was this like ingestible aluminum? What is bioavailable aluminum?
I don't understand. Like, isn't all aluminum bioavailable? Like, I could just eat a ball of tinfoil, right? Like, it's available to my bio, right?
And where was he saying that it is?
All around the world, actually.
All around the world.
It's a global problem. That there's this bioavailable aluminum that is now like seeping into our bodies in various ways.
Okay. Is it recycling?
No. Good suggestion.
Because you got to grind up those cans. You got to reuse them. Where the aluminum flakes might go all over the place. You never know.
Oh, again, Ben, that is making like just slightly too much sense.
Okay. All right.
Think dumber.
Think dumber.
The answer, according to RFK Jr., is chemtrails.
No, get out of town.
Fuck yeah, chemtrails.
I consider myself a chemtrails expert, but I've never heard of aluminum.
Oh, yeah. No, he suggested that one reason that, one thing that chemtrails might explain is these high concentrations of bioavailable aluminum. This one is sort of a trick question, though, because in a 2016 survey of scientists, it showed that most of them didn't even believe that aluminum levels were increasing, let alone chemtrails exist.
Whoops.
So,
can we take a slight side road on chemtrails, because this heavily overlaps with what my new job is these days. So this is chemtrails is like a very, very widespread belief, not just on the right, but also I'd say in the general population, which has kind of surprised me a little bit. This is the belief that the version I mostly hear is that the government or airplane corporations are intentionally geoengineering the earth by spraying chemicals out of the back of planes, and that those are the cloud-like wispy trails you see behind planes. And this is, a ton of people think this, including like my colleagues who are very well informed about environmental issues, and lots of people I've talked to. So once you start asking people, you're going to be surprised by how many people believe this conspiracy. But
it's actually water vapor, right? That's what the clouds are.
Not exactly. It's so the real name is contrails, condensation trails. So it's if you have enough humidity and it's cold enough where the plane is flying, the engine has the soot that comes out, and then the humidity coalesces around the soot and turns into like little ice particles. So they're basically ice clouds. They happen naturally. They're called cirrus clouds. They're the ones that are like so high up they're made of ice particles, but planes make them artificially. They are actually very, very bad because they have a warming effect on the planet. They contribute to global warming. They actually contribute at least as much, if not more, than the fossil fuels that are emitted by planes. So they're very, very bad, but none of it falls to Earth. they're not chemicals. It's just kind of a byproduct of the engines.
And it's not something that someone's intentionally doing.
No, but you can understand why people think it, because contrails have become much more common over time, just because planes are flying higher, which means it's colder, and there's more flights than there used to be. So people are just like looking at the sky and being like, well, why is the sky now covered with airplane trails? And they're trying to like connect the dots. But anyway, this is sidetrack into conspiracy land. But yeah, it is kind of interesting because the one like silver lining for my job, I try to stop geoengineering, like actual geoengineering.
Yes.
And a lot of the right wing are opposed to geoengineering because they think it's already secretly happening out of the back of airplanes, which is not true. It's not already happening, but it is bad. So I'm glad they agree with us. It should be stopped. But it's like a really weird. I feel like a lot of this. We'll probably talk about this when we get to the wellness stuff. It's like where the far right and the far left like merge together and then eat each other's tails, and just weird things happen in politics,
Yes, no, that actually is a very well stated description of what's happening here. Absolutely. And we'll talk about it a little more when we talk about his bizarre origin story as well.
Okay.
All about the left and anyway. I just have a couple more quiz for you. All right. Sorry, I got really into this part. All right. So this is a problem that he perceives. It's not a problem it's not anything that I think is a problem, nothing that you think is a problem, but he sees a lot of gay and trans kids out there, and he has an explanation for it. Bende, what is RFK Jr.'s explanation for increasing numbers of gay and trans kids?
I'm going to go with Richard Simmons.
It's true. He affected a lot of us.
RuPaul, maybe.
And he's been shockingly missing. RuPaul, those were actually also smarter. I'm
just thinking of all the really fabulous celebrities.
Yeah, but you're wrong. It's pesticides and atrazine.
Oh my God.
Atrazine and tap water.
Okay.
This is amazing. He cites this weird study. I can't even go all the way into this here, but I just want to repeat his quote about this, right? He says, atrazine can chemically castrate and forcibly feminize frogs. Doing that to frogs, there's a lot of other evidence that it's doing it to human beings as well.
Oh, so I guess this only explains gay effeminate men, but how do you explain gay women?
That's a really great one. And if I ever meet him,
it's a different pesticide. Yeah, it's the other one. It's the masculinizing one that we all know about that one.
When a baby is born, the stork sprinkles whichever pesticide, and that's how their sex is assigned at birth.
That is wild. I did not know he believed that.
It's pretty great, right? Wow. All right, and I just have two more. One is so this was definitely a health problem, right? Then he is identified here. COVID-19. What does RFK Jr. believe is the cause?
Well, I guess the easy answer here would be a Chinese lab. Is that correct? Yes. All right. Nailed it.
Yes, absolutely. He believes, or at least floated the idea, that COVID-19 was actually a Chinese bioweapon. And this is the logic that got him there. All right. So this is a quote. This is actually from a campaign video. It was like a closed room meeting and it got leaked to the New York Post. All right. He says, COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and Black people. Hush, Ben. Wow. I have to get through this. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and the Chinese. We don't know if it was deliberately targeted or not, but there are papers out there that show racial and ethnic difference, the racial and ethnic differential and the impact of that. We do know that the Chinese are spending hundreds of millions of dollars developing ethnic bioweapons, and we are developing ethnic bioweapons. Thoughts?
I like how I just sprinkled in like a little hint of anti-Semitism in there too, to like round out the theory. Yeah. Has anyone told him that there is no biological basis for race?
Someone did.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the criticisms of that idea that was
Like
mentioned.
it's literally impossible to design something for a race.
I wish I had captured this quote, but this woman who was like an actual scientist or doctor or something, someone who knew things about things. She was like, yeah, Asian and Jewish genes don't really exist in medicine, but they do exist in anti-Semitism and racism.
Right. And also, he seems to have a different memory than I do of how China was impacted by COVID-19. I don't think they did so good.
I don't think it was so awesome for them, but what do I know? Okay, and then this is the final one, and I promise this is the last quiz question I'm going to give you. All right. Okay, so there's a particular health problem that RFK Jr. himself could not ignore, and those are his own problems with memory loss and cognition. What did he say was the cause of his own memory loss and cognition?
Oh, I know this one. Finally, something I've actually seen in the news. This is his brainworm, right?
This is the brainworm.
Yes.
That's right. And all of this comes out of he literally said in 2012, a worm got into my brain and ate a portion of it and then died. He said this during a divorce deposition, which I think is like a really funny venue for this kind of information to come out.
Maybe even an explanatory venue.
He's trying to make the argument that he was so bad at his job that his wife should ask for less alimony.
Yeah, seriously. Clearly. It's a reduction of your your net worth if you have had your brain eaten.
Absolutely. He also cited tuna fish as a problem. He said he was living almost exclusively on tuna fish, which has a lot of mercury in it. So
is that a cause of the brainworm or a reaction to the brainworm? Or totally separate?
As far as I can tell, tuna fish and the brainworm are separate because many people believe that the brainworm must have been a pork-borne tapeworm. However, I think that we can all agree that the man isn't paying enough attention to what he eats and is causing some problems. So yeah.
I got to tell you, when a worm eats my brain, they don't die. They thrive. I got good brain. I have good brain meat. If the worm eating your brain dies, there's something wrong already. Okay. Pre-existing problem.
The worm got into his brain and died from lack of nutrition.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I like this argument.
Maybe he was too fucking stupid.
I mean, all right. Okay, but he's stupid, but also is he stupid? And like, this is the part of the story that baffles me, right? So, all right, despite the fact that he is about to be nominated to lead HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, right? RFK Jr. is not a doctor or a medical researcher, right? And I mean, we can chalk some of this stuff up to the brainworm, right? But if we put the neural parasites aside, I guess the big question is, how did this guy get to be a quote unquote public health expert to begin with?
Well, I suspect the answer is he didn't. But as a current, environmental campaigner, I'm ashamed to say that he does have like a bit of a decent track record doing like working at the intersection of environment and public health, I guess we could put it, right? Yeah. Like back in the 1980s, he was volunteering with the Hudson River Fishermen's Association, which was later named the River Keeper, which became the inspiration for the global water keeper movement that people may have heard about. And he was doing like suing big corporations like GE for polluting the Hudson, and he helped like formulate the 1990s New York City watershed agreement. He actually did some good shit back in the day,
Yeah. I mean, it's not just good shit; it's like the shit that we really like.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the healthcare for all of environmental work.
Taking on the corporations.
I mean,
exactly, we hate corporations.
Yeah.
And then also
working with impacted communities, storytelling, maybe, who knows?
He's a big racial justice guy, right? Like he helped to, he helped some folks in the Bronx who were suing to get, suing to get some environmental bad actor out of their neighborhood. And then he actually ended up standing with the indigenous water protectors to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Okay, yeah.
And like he attributed like so much of this to the Koch brothers and money in politics. Like it just, that's not stupid thinking. That's not brainworm thinking. That's actually kind of smart thinking.
Yeah. And this is where it gets like, I mean, he's clearly gone off the rails at some point very recently, I think. But it's also weird to understand how he's going to fit with the Trump agenda, Trump ideology, all this other stuff. Because like even in the 2020s, just the last handful of years, he supported the Green New Deal. You know, he's an AOC guy. He, he, in a notable 2020 quote, he called Trump, quote, simply the radical step of a process that's been happening in our country and in the Republican Party from the past, well, since the 1980s, which is a growing hostility towards the environment, a growing orientation to representing the concentrated corporate power and power, particularly of the oil industry and the chemical industry, and some of the other large polluting industries, end quote. That, I mean, sounds like something that might come out of our mouths at some point.
Yes. It always makes me a little bit nervous when I see someone who is like obviously unhinged, and then I find out that like we agree about a bunch of stuff. I'm like,
yes, it is unsettling, isn't it?
It's troubling. Yeah. He's also a big critique of something that you, I know, feel strongly about, which is geoengineering. You mentioned that before. Yeah,
no, that's the ultimate odd, strange feeling, which is that he mostly, at least today, comes at criticizing geoengineering from a conspiracy approach, which we talked about earlier. The belief that geoengineering is already secretly being conducted by the government by spraying chemtrails. And he was active just like in the days leading up to the election, tweeting about that, responding to these like chemtrail conspiracy tweets and saying, we're going to stop this when we win and we get into government. So it's like, wanting the right thing for the completely wrong reasons, which is, it's like a silver lining, but very unsettling silver lining. There's like a dark lining to the silver lining, if that makes sense.
Like a pewter lining somewhere.
Right.
Or mercury lining. Perhaps it's the mercury. Speaking of mercury, though, all right, how does this guy make the transition from being an environmental lawyer, a Kennedy? I mean, this dude is like Bobby Kennedy's son. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
He's a lefty. He was like this environmentalist. He was like taking on the big corporations or whatever. Like, how the hell did he turn into this anti-vaxxing weirdo?
My personal theory is it's because all of the Kennedys died in small plane crashes, like trying to fly their own little personal planes. I think too much of the Kennedy family has been either assassinated or just like died under strange circumstances. We call it the Kennedy curse. I'm a Massachusettsan, so we treat the Kennedys like the royal family in England, but yeah, anyway, so that maybe aside from him not having a reality check in his family anymore, apparently he was working a case against a polluter that had been contaminating drinking water with mercury in the early 2000s. More of a reasonable fear of mercury, I would say, than vaccines. And he met a persistent group of mothers. I hate blaming a persistent group of mothers. I think we should encourage persistent groups of mothers. But this particular group claimed that the real problem was mercury in vaccines. He was initially reluctant, but was eventually persuaded, which is strange. So he told Joe Rogan in 2023, and no good thing ends that begins with he told Joe Rogan in 2023. He said, I thought even if they're wrong, someone should listen to them.
I don't even disagree with that statement. Like, I think we should be listening to people even if they're wrong, but I'm just like, oh, you can really, really pinpoint the moment.
It means a lot more than listen to them. Yes.
Oh man. Yeah. So, and then at that point, right, he hooks up with the actual organized anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, and this is the World Mercury Project in 2017, and then 2015 he became the board for the organization, which gets rebranded as the Children's Defense Fund. This is probably the one you've heard about, the anti-vax group. So, oh my God! And have you heard this story about Samoa? This has been making the rounds. This is where like the rubber really hits the road, and like the crazy kind of funny, but like quirky shit, you realize actually how dangerous it is in the world of public health and healthcare. So 2019, RFK Jr. brought his anti-vax message to Samoa, where he met with government officials, spoke out publicly against the measles vaccine. And then just 1 year later, by 2020, at least 83 people had died in a massive measles outbreak that was caused by lower rates of vaccination. And then RFK blamed the vaccine itself for the measles outbreak.
Yeah, that one's fun. That's
right.
Fun.
And sadly, to me, this is like maybe a little bit more how we should be looking at him heading up HHS. Like even if he doesn't, they're going to change big policies. They're going to slash programs. But even without all that, just the words that come out of your mouth can have like pretty profound health and public health impacts. Because all of health kind of relies on people buying into medical best practices and buying into wanting to be treated and having faith that they're not going to be screwed over by their providers. And if you undermine that on a big national scale, it is going to have devastating health consequences. So,
yeah. Boy, just so you know, we got a comment here in the chat that says, just to let you know that Trump appointed Dr. Oz to head the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. I'm not kidding. This just happened. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Pedro. I feel like I want to like permanently make my email signature now. I'm not kidding. This just happened.
Right. Yes.
In Trump's America, that feels important.
Yeah. And believe it or not, we did a podcast episode on Dr. Oz. He was running for governor of Pennsylvania. But I suspect we're going to have to revisit that one. He is basically like a snake oil salesman. He will sell you any health product if he's paid to do it. And we actually, before the episode started, Jillian, you and I were talking a little bit about like, is Dr. Oz like on the same page, like in the same camp as RFK Jr., or are they actually like dramatically different camps? And you could almost make the case both ways, right? I mean, on the one hand, the Dr. Oz show was kind of this faux wellness, like prevent yourself from getting sick in the first place type of thing. But on the other hand, he was very pro-corporate, and any corporation that would pay him, he would advocate for their product. And RFK Jr. has this like, I don't know, a veneer at least of anti-corporate America, anti-corruption to it. But
yeah. I wonder though, like, I mean, the second someone gives him his own line of supplements, he's going to be hawking that. Though.
Right. Oh God, this is terrifying.
Oh, so scary, so scary. All right. So we know that this guy, just the way this guy talks has real life consequences, right? Him with zero power, just him and his name, his reputation, and his money. He has actually managed to give measles to children in Samoa, which is wild to me. Just like, again, just the way he talks about it, right? It can increase vaccine hesitancy in another country, for all places. All right. Here's the question. With the unholy alliance of Dr. Oz and RFK Jr., like what kind of damage can these guys actually do?
Well, I think pretty extensive. I'm sad to say. I mean, so we have a list here of all the programs that are run under Health and Human Services. I won't go through it all because it's just like, it's a little bit of word soup, but some of the ones that you will recognize the most are Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This was obviously the primary agency dealing with the COVID outbreak, but they deal with all kind of, they're a huge public health agency preventing exposure to communicable diseases and all that stuff. So, but there's also the Food and Drug Administration, which has already been pretty severely compromised. And we've already seen, in fact, on this podcast, we talked about how Dr. Oz and Trump tried to lobby the FDA to approve a fake treatment for COVID.
Yes.
So you could only imagine what they would do when they're running the FDA. Yeah.
He specifically, RFK Jr. specifically mentioned in his tweets, chlorphenephrine, I want to say. I can't. Chloroquine. Shit. No, I can't remember any of the
Second
names.
one was closer, chloroquine. Yeah.
Ivermectin, I think that's the worst one. But he specifically mentions some of those fake COVID treatments that, really get investigated.
Yeah, so that's risky. There is obviously the Indian Health Service, which is it's not only a health insurance system, but it's a health provider network for indigenous peoples on reservation lands. There's lots of damage that can be done there. It's already a completely inadequately funded system. It's good it's there. It's a free public program. It's like the very least we can do for the ongoing legacy of colonialism in the US. But anyway, the list goes on and on and on. And with each one, it's like a little bit terrifying. There's a lot of research agencies in there that are heavily relied upon for, making public policy that's in line with, actual real medical research findings. So yeah, I am deeply concerned, and not least of these agencies, of course, is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which Dr. Oz will be running. That runs, what percentage of the population has Medicare or Medicaid? It's got to be like a fourth of the country or something like that. It's just a huge number. So
yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this guy has some wacky ideas about healthcare that are pretty popular with morons, and so therefore, let's put him in charge of a government institution that is in charge of trillions of dollars, between all the research funding that goes through the NIH, payouts to providers and patients and Medicare, Medicaid, all of that. It's a business, and it's huge government operations.
Right.
And there he is. And the fact is that we don't actually know a lot about how he feels about healthcare itself, right? Because
he has no experience whatsoever in this field.
Right. Because he's never worked in healthcare or whatever. We have actually no idea how he feels about some of we were talking before this about the Project 2025, where does he fit in there, right? Yeah. Answer is, I don't know. I know that Project 2025 people, some of them like what he has to say about health, but I know that, I also don't know how he feels about Medicare or Medicaid as an entitlement, or, whether we should be trying to phase people off Medicare and Medicaid or expand it, or, whatever.
Right. And I know we now have this Looney Tunes, and we should say that we can't say with certainty that RFK Jr. will be confirmed by the Senate.
Sure.
There is a possibility. I think it's more likely that Matt Gaetz will get shot down than RFK Jr., but maybe if we're lucky, he won't make it through the confirmation process. A lot of that really has to see, are there, 4 or 5 senators with enough spine to stand up to Trump on anything? We're going to find that out sooner rather than later, unfortunately. But even if he does get confirmed and we have this just weirdo conspiracy theory lunatic running HHS, I still think what Congress is capable of doing is probably more dangerous than anything he can do. And we've just been reading news that Republican congressional leaders are talking about significant cuts to Medicaid, like adding work requirements nationally to Medicaid, along with cutting food access to food stamps. So that's the stuff that is, to me, even more terrifying. At least, if RFK is trying to do things outside of the bounds of the law, we can sue his ass and stop him from doing some of it. And of course, any damage they do, we can try to undo if you get a Democrat elected president. But the law is much tougher to reverse. You need the trifecta. You need House, Senate, and President to undo damage that's done by congressional law that gets signed into by the president. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway, right? Like, be more scared of Congress than you are of RFK. But
yeah, that's saying a lot.
Don't be scared of RFK.
Yeah, I wanted to, end on an uplifting note. A bigger terror to worry about.
I mean, I actually think that the ultimate joke here, right? It may end up being on Trump, right? Maybe RFK gets into this position and all of a sudden remembers who the fuck he is and who he's supposed to be fighting for. And it turns out that even though he thinks we should all be drinking raw milk and not have fluoride in our water, that he turns out that we should all have healthcare,
Right.
So who knows? I mean, again, maybe the joke's on Trump. Maybe RFK is going to turn out to be a man of the people and advocate for Medicare for all.
I like your sense of optimism. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's possible. There might be some overlap between the wellness, right-wing, anti-corporate, approach and the kind of progressive, pro-universal anti-corporate approach,
Yeah.
So if there is, then there might be opportunities to win some stuff, but I do worry that he's going to be operating within the constraints of the Trump administration. So if he's loyal,
say no constraints at all.
Oh, exactly. I mean, well, within the constraints of what Trump wants you to do, I guess, is more.
That is actually a real constraint.
He seems to be choosing his nominees based on who will do exactly what they tell him to, what they're told to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's going to continue with any of his ideals that he's had over the years before he entered the loony bin, but yeah, we'll see.
I don't know. I also just want to say that we said several times that RFK is crazy, and
right,
and we're slipping.
We actually like crazy people. Yes,
we love crazy people. Yes. I am crazy. Ben is crazy. We have serious mental health issues, and yet neither of us has ever given measles to kids in Samoa. I just want to point that out. That there's a difference between being
allegedly
crazy bad and crazy good. Yeah.
Allegedly, we have not given measles to kids in Samoa.
And that's for another episode.
Yes. All right. Well, I think if we want to close on an actual uplifting note, we should remind everyone to just enjoy the next month and a half.
Just fucking chill.
It hasn't happened yet. Do whatever you need to take care of yourselves and your mental health, and there's going to be a time to fight. Yes, exactly.
Get on the medications now that you think you're going to need to get.
Yeah. Order them in bulk, right? Oh my God. Start stockpiling those vaccines, baby. So yeah. Anyway, there's going to be a time to fight very, very soon, but we're not yet at the time to fight. So yeah. It's time to start thinking, start planning, but also taking care of ourselves, I'd say. So.
Yeah. And if this is the first time that you have ever thought about what person is going to be the head of Health and Human Services, at least you learn something new about how the government works.
Yes. Our apologies that this is your intro. I wish we could have done it 4 or 5 years ago. All right. Well, I want to thank our podcast team. Our podcast manager is Angelique Davis. Our show notes writer is Jerry Katz. And our audio editor is Craig Stanton. Thanks so much to those three. Do not forget to like this episode, subscribe to the Medicare for All podcast on whatever your favorite platform is. And final reminder that this show is a project of the Healthcare Now Education Fund. So if you want to support our work, allow us to keep making these episodes, then you can donate at our website, healthcare-now.org. See you next time,
Stay safe
everyone.
and stay dangerous, y'all.